Hello, my name is Withheld, and I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm physically in, but mentally out of the organization. I became a non-believer because I had several questions regarding Christianity, which simply don't have any satisfying answers. The majority of these issues apply to Christianity in general, but this video is primarily from the perspective of Jehovah's Witnesses. As you listen to these issues that I'm about to raise, you may be inclined to think of a biblical answer or something that was explained in a Watchtower article, and that's okay. But I'm asking you to also think outside of the box a little bit in simple, practical terms. Think about what seems to be the most reasonable to you. Okay, now here are some of those questions. Why is it that in the Bible, Jehovah frequently speaks to humans directly or through an angel, and yet in our day we only have a book as his word instead of his actual audible words? Why is the Bible full of unmistakable instances of divine intervention, but in our day we only have ambiguous answers to prayers and blessings that could be explained away as coincidence or human effort? In the Bible, Jehovah consistently used miraculous signs and wonders to demonstrate his blessing over whoever his chosen people were at a given time, and to indicate his approval upon whatever arrangement for worship he was backing at the time. Yet in the current time period, when we supposedly have more counterfeit religions than ever claiming to represent the God of the Bible, we don't have any miracles to indicate which one is true. Why is it that in the Bible, Jehovah guided his people using inspired prophets whose predictions always came true? And yet the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses is not inspired and have made many incorrect predictions? Why did all of the aforementioned supernatural events only occur in Bible times? And yet in the modern age of science, skepticism, and video recording, we don't see anything of the sort. If these are the last days, then why do we not have any supernatural proof of God's existence at the most critical time in man's history when it would seem to matter the most? Some would say that we don't need supernatural proof of God's existence because we need to develop faith. But at Hebrews chapter 11, the Bible speaks of Noah, Abraham, and Moses as outstanding examples of faith. Yet they all spoke to God and witnessed other miracles. So according to that, lacking proof of God's existence is not a prerequisite for faith. If you think about it, how does believing that God exists without having any real proof add to the love or the morality of the Christian congregation? How does it help to vindicate Jehovah's sovereignty? Indeed, wouldn't it be more meaningful for humans to develop faith that Jehovah will keep his promises, faith that his instructions will ultimately work out to be the most beneficial? See, we can develop that sort of faith in someone without being left to guess whether or not they're even real. In the Bible, it was the worshippers of Baal that believed in their God without any proof of his existence. On the other hand, it was Elijah that called on Jehovah to provide proof that he was the true God and that Baal was a lifeless idol. Now, I know this is the part where defenders of Christianity would jump in and say that we don't need to hear God's voice anymore because the Bible speaks for itself. They would say that we don't need inspired prophets because the Bible is already inspired. They might also say that we don't need modern day miracles because the miracles of the past are already recorded in the Bible. And of course, everything that's written in a book has to be true, right? So that's all the proof we need by that logic. Then they might add that all my other questions are already answered in the Bible, but I just haven't read it the right way. They would say that I'm either not meditating on the scriptures enough to read between the lines, or depending on who you ask, maybe I'm reading too much into it. Still others would say that the reason why I don't have the truth is because I've been led astray by those darn Jehovahs And if I only came to their church, then I would have the correct understanding. Never mind the other 30,000 Christian denominations worldwide that would disagree with their church on some points. If you think about it, it's absurd. But even if we go ahead and believe that some interpretation of the Bible is true, then why are there so many interpretations in the first place? Why is the Bible so difficult to understand that it produces so many contradictory interpretations? If Jehovah has a message of such vital importance that all of humanity is required to hear, understand, and live by it, then why wouldn't he make it simple, clear, and concise enough for everyone to readily comprehend, regardless of cultural or educational background? Why would we have to understand the nuances of ancient Hebrew and Greek, or the cultural context of those ancient societies, just to get the full meaning of God's word? For that matter, why did God confuse the language of mankind at the Tower of Babel in the first place if he knew that he was going to spread his word to all mankind through a book that would need to be translated? Considering that millions of people around the world are illiterate and that many languages don't even have a written form, why wouldn't Jehovah just miraculously transmit his message directly into each human's mind? After all, if our action or inaction in response to this message is part of some sort of universal trial, then don't we all have a right to be fully informed about the issues involved and what's at stake for us? Yet, there are still people who don't even have a complete Bible available in their language, and millions more who don't know about Jehovah's Witnesses. And if the name Jehovah is so important as Jehovah's Witnesses claim, then why did Jehovah allow it to be removed from the vast majority of Bible translations? Keep in mind that most of the Bibles distributed throughout the world and most of the languages that they are available in are from Christendom, not the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. So why did Jehovah allow the majority of mankind to receive a faulty version of his word, which omits one of the most important features, his name? And in that case, how do we know that our translation isn't incorrect too? We do know that our pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton is not correct. Why wouldn't Jehovah preserve the actual pronunciation of his name? Such a huge detail is treated as largely irrelevant, and yet we're supposed to read all these study notes on the finer details of ancient cultures in order to understand why slavery and polygamy were okay back then, and later they certainly weren't okay anymore. Now, as I stated at the outset, there are no satisfying answers to these questions. I'm familiar with the excuses commonly taught by Jehovah's Witnesses and other Christians, but these explanations are not reasonable, at least not to me. God's thoughts are supposedly higher than our thoughts, so we wouldn't expect to know everything that he knows, or even understand everything that he understands. But we're not talking about strictly heavenly matters here. We're talking about God as he relates to humans. If we're made in his image, shouldn't his interactions with us, or the lack thereof, make some sense to us? Shouldn't the Bible, which was written specifically for humans, make sense to us? Especially if our all-wise Creator was the ultimate author of it. So, for all these reasons and more, I currently identify as atheist. Now, that's not because I believe that it's impossible for the Bible to be true, but rather because I don't think that it's reasonable to believe that it is. I can't prove that the God of the Bible does not exist, and nor would I even want to. In fact, I wish it did exist. I devoted a lot of years of my life to serving him, and I hoped in the promises that we were taught as Jehovah's Witnesses. But as far as I can tell, the Bible is just a storybook of heavily embellished ancient history and vague predictions that could fit virtually any time period. Having said all that, though, I do believe in intelligent design. Not because I think it's a fact or even that there's proof of it. There's not. I just personally think that it's possible, or maybe even probable, that we have a creator or that some sort of intelligence was involved, just because of how I interpret the available evidence. But I don't believe that it's necessary to worship the creator as God. I also don't believe that he intends to change the world or destroy it. If the creator, or who knows, maybe creators of our world, wanted us to have immortality, then they probably would have already made us that way. Now, I'm not one of those people who tries to convince themselves that death is beautiful or good just because it's a seemingly natural part of our existence. But I do believe that we kind of have to accept it as a fact of life, whether we like it or not. At least, unless we find a medical cure one day, a cure that our collective greed would actually allow to be distributed, that is. So anyway, in conclusion, I don't hate Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm not on some crusade against the organization either, although I do respect the fact that others are. But me, I simply lack belief. Now, I do resent some of the toxic and downright ridiculous aspects of JW culture and beliefs, but that's another story for perhaps another video. So anyway, that's the video for right now. That's where I'm at. For right now, I'm remaining in the organization, at least in name only, because most of my friends and family are Jehovah's Witnesses, and I would very much prefer to not be shunned. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Maybe it gave you something to think about or something you could relate to. If so, I would love to read your comments. Please do mash the like button and subscribe if you're interested in seeing future content. I do plan on doing more videos about my JW experience and various aspects of JW culture. But in the meantime, take care, and please love and respect yourself and your fellow human beings.